They found her before dawn. The first light of morning barely filtered through the trees, mist still coiled along the grass and creek. Clara McCrae stood there barefoot in the frigid water, one arm wrapped tight around a sleeping infant, the other clawing at the riverbank like she was trying to unearth her own soul. Her dress was soaked, torn along the side, clinging to her frail frame like parchment to flame. Her hair was wild, tangled with soot and dead leaves. The child in her arms didn't cry, only wheezed shallow and weak, as if life itself was dangling by a thread. Its hands, too, were coated in red clay, red like blood, red like grief. Behind her, the McCrae homestead was still smoking, a skeleton of wood and memory. The barn wall bore a crude message scrawled in ash: the cost of silence. No one knew who wrote it. No one dared ask. The townsfolk of Hollow Bend rode past without pausing, eyes lowered, spines stiff, like looking too long might curse them too. And then he arrived. Baron Calder. A man astride a gray horse wearing a long black coat, no visible weapon, but danger clung to him like shadow to bone. He didn't speak, didn't ask why she stood there, or what the ashes meant, or whether the child still breathed. He dismounted slowly, like time bowed to him, took the shovel from her trembling hand, and began to dig. Each stroke deep and sure, as if he were carving truth from the earth. For the first time, Clara let go. Of the shovel. Of her pain. She collapsed not from weakness, but because someone finally had knelt beside her. Not out of pity, but because he understood. I once saw Clara McCrae at dawn just once passing the wash station, clutching two babies, her dress threadbare and caked in mud, eyes unblinking, steps unbroken. She didn't look at anyone, didn't wait to be pitied. And truth is, no one in this town wanted to be near her. Clara used to be a name spoken with warmth. But after one winter, she lost her husband, her voice, her place in the world. No one asked why. People preferred their version of the story over the truth. They said she was mad, said she brought it on herself, that the screams from the McCrae house that night weren't cries for help, they were guilt wailing in the dark. Some claimed her husband drowned in a flash flood. Others whispered she pushed him. And Clara, she never defended herself. Couldn't. She'd gone deaf maybe from a blow. Maybe worse, but who would prove it? This town never listened when she could speak. Why would they now? I saw her eyes. Eyes of someone who used to be human until society stripped her of her voice, her name, her place. Clara wasn't just a grieving widow. She was a living verdict, proof that silence can be forced and that cruelty wears the mask of decency. So the town avoided her like plague. Mothers clutched their children tighter when she passed. Men tilted their hats, but never their heads, afraid of what truth might spill out if they looked too closely. Even the laughter of her baby's people treated it like blasphemy. How could someone like her deserve joy? But I remember the last time I saw her. At the well, sunlight in her tangled hair. One baby in her arms, the other slung behind her, hauling up the bucket with a limp that didn't stop her. A silhouette of defiance carved in grief. And I thought maybe we're the deaf ones. Maybe Clara McCrae is just the only soul left who can still hear the sound of a conscience. They thought he would arrive like a storm. Loud, demanding, reckless, ready to uproot what little remained of her fragile world. But no. He came like shade at noon. Quiet. Each step he took felt deliberate, as if he didn't want to disturb the silence she'd grown used to wearing like skin. That first day he brought nothing but his presence. No questions, no pity. Just a tin of powdered milk, exactly the kind Clara knew could only be bought downriver in Bisley, 40 miles away. She stared at it like someone had handed her a key to a world she'd buried beneath grief. He returned the next day, and the next. Sometimes with bread, sometimes with thread, the exact color of the tear on her dress. Sometimes with nothing at all, just himself leaning quietly against the porch, like a monument to patience. What unsettled her wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't. He never asked her to speak, never looked away when she didn't. He stood still like a witness to something sacred falling apart, and still chose to stay. Then one day, tucked inside a basket of eggs, he left by her door. She found a note. The handwriting was rough, uneven, but unmistakable. I don't need sound to hear you. The basket slipped from her fingers. Her hands shook. But her tears came fast, and hot tears that had forgotten their way for months. How long had it been since someone looked at her, not with pity, but with understanding? Since someone didn't see a broken widow with 2 fatherless children, but a woman still breathing, still burning quietly beneath the ash. Clara didn't know who he was or where he came from. She didn't ask, because none of it mattered. He saw her, not the silence, not the limp, not the loss. Her. And sometimes that's all it takes to begin again. No one knows exactly what happened that night. Only that after it, Hollow Bend never slept quite the same again. The wind knifed through the cracks in Clara's door, cold and sharp. A single oil lamp flickered in the window, a quiet signal she left behind. I see you. I am not alone. And true to that message, he was there, Baron Calder, at the edge of the field. Silent. Still. Rifle slung low. Watching. Waiting. Then he came. Not Calder. Not anyone Clara wanted to see. A figure broader than most, dragging one leg, the limp all too familiar. A face like soaked bark, swollen and twisted. Jed Carter. Her dead husband's cousin. The last man who dared claim he had rights to her land. He had once offered her comfort in the shape of a belt buckle and a bruised lip. She had said no, loudly, clearly, defiantly, and Jed had never forgiven her for surviving. He came reeking of whiskey and power he thought he still had. Clara girl, open up. Ain't no need for fear, he drawled through clenched teeth, voice thick and sweet like rotting fruit. Inside, Clara didn't move. Didn't even breathe. Her arms curled tighter around the twins, as if she could hold off the whole world with a heartbeat. Then, bang! One clean shot, like thunder with purpose. Jed cried out, staggered backward. His voice turned into a snarl, then silence swallowed him whole. When Clara dared to part the curtain, Calder stood in the halo of candlelight. His rifle still smoked, his stance calm, his gaze steady. No words, no anger, just quiet assurance. He looked at her, at the babies, then turned and stood watch the rest of the night. He didn't come to rescue. He came to make sure no one hurt her again. I don't remember how many steps I took after seeing that paper. Only that my hands trembled like they were burning, and my heart beat like it was trying to shatter itself apart. The notice was nailed to the market's wooden wall right below the town bulletin, where folks usually posted about fair dates, hunting updates, or the latest price of sugar. But this time it was my name. Bold ink, still wet. Public auction of property by county decree. Below that, scrawled like a sentence already carried out, Clara L. McCrae. I heard the townsfolk murmuring behind me. The same ones who used to avert their eyes now stared at me like I was some wounded animal still refusing to die. And then he appeared. Jed Carter. His eyes lit up like he'd just drunk the last of the whiskey in his flask. He raised it toward me, smiling. Can't live off pity forever, Clara, he drawled. Town's got rules. You can't keep what you didn't earn. I don't remember how I ran, only that my legs couldn't keep up with the fire building inside me. The twins cried, but their voices felt far away. I stumbled through the gate, collapsed into the snow. My knees hit the ground hard. I still held them. I couldn't scream, couldn't cry. Only one thing filled me despair. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not hurried, not loud. Just his, the kind I'd learned to trust. Baron Calder. He didn't speak, didn't gasp. He only bent down, gathered the twins from my arms, wrapped them in his coat. Then he sat beside me, not touching, just shielding me from the wind like a wall. When my breath stopped shaking, he said softly, "Let's go inside." He lit the stove, boiled water, found the chipped blue mug I always used. When he handed it to me, I nearly broke. But what undid me was the small leather pouch he placed on the table, brimming with coins. "I bought the deed back," he said, "and I'll sign it over to you. No one's taking this land again." I tried to sign. Why? My hands failed me. He didn't wait. "I can't fix what they stole," he said, "but I can stand beside you while you take it back." They said when a woman like Clara McCrae starts fixing her own roof, it's a sign the devil's come loose. Because no one wants to witness someone who's lost everything still daring to rebuild her fire pit and hang linen by the door. But I saw it all. I work at the bakery window facing the dirt path that snakes toward her half-burnt home, though it wasn't burnt anymore. Not with him around. I saw them, her and that man they called Baron, though no one ever asked for proof. Each afternoon, Clara hobbled into town, dragging one-leg dress soaked in mud, twin babies laughing like they didn't know the world hated them. And each morning I watched him, bare hands, not gripping pistols but hammers, salt sacks, spools of thread. One morning the hammering began at dawn, steady like someone's heartbeat returning after too long dead. And I thought, dear Lord, she's rebuilding the world with nothing but splinters and stubbornness. Then the law showed up. Sheriff Ruckley, half man, half policy, stood at Clara's fence like a judge with a rope already in hand. He carried a letter formal as a slap. Eviction notice, accusation squatting, fraudulent claim, written by people who had never once looked her in the eye. But the shock wasn't in the letter. It was in how she answered it. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She opened the door slow and silent and let him see what he didn't expect. A warm table. A child giggling in a man's arms, one they feared and whispered about. And a fire crackling in the stove, not burning with hatred, but hope. Baron stepped forward with a deed signed legal and firm. "We've got a right to be here," he said. The crowd watching didn't say a word. But I swear on my mother's apron, something shifted that day. The town no longer saw Clara as a ghost. They saw her as a flame. One you might not like, but one you damn well better not try to put out. The past didn't knock on their door. It kicked it in like a storm that didn't wait for permission. And that afternoon, Clara knew the storm had found its way back. The sun was barely clinging to the fence posts when it began. Calder was still learning the sign for hope, his fingers clumsy, and Clara had just laughed when he got it wrong until they heard the hoofbeats. 6 horses. Not rushed. Not hidden. Like a funeral drum rolling across the valley. Clara stood first. Not because she wasn't afraid, she'd just faced death too many times to mistake its shadow. She recognized the man at the head of the riders before he even spoke. A long coat dirtied and stained with blood, a gold pin at the collar, a grin too sharp to belong to a friend Duke, Calder's older brother, once a smuggler, a war dog, a ghost in 3 states. Now he rode in like the land was still his. Well, well, Duke drawled. Little brother playing house with the mute widow and her phantom babies. Calder didn't answer. Clara didn't need to. The cold wind answered for her. What do you want? Calder asked, voice low but hard as flint. To collect, Duke said. You owe blood, bullets, and silence. You ran from men who don't forget. And now you've bought yourself a wife, you're coming with us. One last job, then vanish into the sunset if you want. Clara stepped forward, just enough to press her fingers to Calder's sleeve. And when he looked at her, her eyes asked a single question. What did you hide from me? Calder lowered his gaze. For the first time she saw not strength, but remorse. I smuggled, swapped uniforms, lied in courts. I let others die so I could live. I thought I left it behind, but it followed me here. The silence that followed wasn't hers. It was the world itself holding breath before judgment. Clara stepped back, not out of fear, but because she knew if he didn't choose her now, he'd become another ghost in the long line that had haunted her life. They no longer called her a curse, not after what they had seen. Spring didn't arrive with flowers, it came with wind sweeping across the porch and the dirt-stained hands of a woman once condemned. Clara wore the dress she had stitched herself, cheap fabric, but seams straight as the spine of someone who no longer bowed. The scar behind her ear showed beneath her pulled-back hair. She didn't hide it anymore. She didn't have to. Calder wore a clean shirt. No badge, no insignia. Just the kind of man whose hands now bore calluses from building rather than surviving. The same hands that once held weapons now learned to hold a future. They stood by the fence, the very first thing they had built together, not to divide, but to declare, this is home. No priest, no psalms, only two children clutching wildflowers, an aging mayor as witness, and the wind itself blowing as if it too needed to bear witness. Clara didn't speak, but when she laid her hand over Calder's, her fingers trembled, then steadied. I'm not alone anymore, she signed. The hearts outside that fence tightened in their chests. No one clapped. No one cheered. But no one turned away. That night she lit 2 candles, one for the man beside her, one for the man buried beneath the rosemary bush. She did not cry. But when Calder took her hand, she didn't pull away. She tightened her grip gently, but enough to turn unspoken things into truth. Weeks passed. The ranch grew like trust. They took in a boy named Elijah, abandoned and silent, never asked where he came from. The barn was finished the day a foal was born. Clara named her Grace because that's what it felt like to watch something fragile find its footing in a world once cruel. That night, she sat on the porch, watching the children sleep in Calder's lap, their faces turned to the fire, peaceful. She leaned into him, not from weariness, but because she finally believed. She was never a burden. She had always been someone's miracle. Now she could be her own,